All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to Lunchalytics, the lunchtime data analytics mixer. So today's theme is going to be data visualization. So we've got some really spectacular speakers lined up. One group from Darkhorse Analytics and one group from the City of Edmonton. And as we all know, we're very visual creatures, us humans. So a lot of times you create all these awesome data insights, but no one's really going to absorb that on the other end until you put it into some kind of a meaningful visual format that they can use to understand the story you're trying to tell. So before we get into it, I'm gonna take some time to acknowledge our sponsors. So Go Auto, Alberta Data Partnerships, NATE Computer Training Center, and ATB Financial. That's where I'm from, Reese Chenard, your host, filling in for Dan Height. Dan didn't get shorter. I'm just filling in as he's on a business trip. I also want to make sure that we give a shout out to Startup Edmonton. They always help us out with this space, and we really appreciate having a great spot to come together and network every month. So before we get going, someone from NATE is going to stand up and give us a short pitch. So I'd like to welcome Surinder up here.
Short pitch? How short should it be?
Well, I'll hook you off.
Anyway, I won't take much of your time. I just put out the NATE Computer Training Center calendar. We offer a lot of courses in the space. They're all part-time, non-accredited courses. So Daniel Haight is one of our advisory members who helped create the program. We have a program called Business Analyst and Data Management, and also an intelligence program that we have. Recently, we launched a data science program where we're getting overwhelming response from the folks. It's pretty much on a waiting list all the time. And I know Marcin, he runs the data science out of the meetup place here. So so that's a program that it's doing really, really well. So if there's any questions about the program, I'll be around after the speaking engagement, so I can answer any questions. So like I said, these are part-time, non-accredited courses available mostly on weekends. So if you're looking to develop your skills in machine learning, Python, we've got courses, and most of the courses, like I said, are listed in this catalog. And if you want to check the dates out, what the cost is, they're all available on the website. Okay, so just have a look and see if you're interested. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, sir. So ATB Financial's data unit is also doing a bit of hiring right now. If you guys are interested, if people are here looking for developer positions or data analyst positions, or even things like program management or enterprise content management, then please come up and talk with me or other people from the ATB crew, and we'll give you a little bit more information about that. So without further ado, let's get moving. The City of Edmonton is here. I would like to ask George White and Karen Parker up, and they're going to talk to you about visualizing municipal data. So let's give them a round of applause here to get them started.
So thanks, Reese. So our presentation is split into two parts. So I'm going to talk a bit about the visualizations we do for citizens, and then our assessment and taxation branch does a lot of great work for employees with dashboards and visualizations. So George is going to go into that piece of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about just data at the city in general. We'll talk about some of the tools we use specifically at the City of Edmonton. Some of them are available for free if you want to go and teach yourself how to use some of them. And then again, I'll get into visualizing data for citizens, and George will talk about how we visualize data for employees, specifically in our assessment and taxation branch. So some of you may be familiar with our open data portal. Has anyone here used data from the portal before, just by a show of hands? So a few of you. So we've been voted the most open city in Canada for 3 years in a row. And a big piece of that is our open data portal. So we release a lot of our data for citizens to consume, or for anyone in the world really to consume, in a variety of different areas, everything from our transit data to the number of pet licenses in each neighborhood, which you'll see a little bit later. Lots of downloads in the catalog, and we've actually been voted a top 7 intelligent community on a world stage. One of the things we've really been working on lately is getting a more data savvy workforce. So we've been lauded for open data for many years, but how are we using data internally, and do our staff know how to use it for their work? So we actually have training courses that are available for employees now. So we actually have a data storytelling course. So if you're interested in taking data and telling a story and creating visualizations, we have a course that employees can take all about that. If you need to learn a little bit more about working with data before you go to that step, we also have a data literacy course that our employees can take. And then we offer training on Tableau. And we have a Tableau server that we run internally at the city, and we also publish visualizations for citizens on it. There's also emerging adoption of ArcGIS Online and other Esri tools that have some real potential for visualizing geospatial data. So as I mentioned, we use Tableau at the City of Edmonton. We're a Tableau shop. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a self-serve business intelligence tool that's really great for quickly visualizing dashboards or visualizing data and getting insights. So we do run an internal Tableau server where employees can create visualizations, upload them to the server, set permissions on them to share them with a subset or all city employees. We also publish visualizations on Tableau Public for citizens to consume. And we've recently started creating more things both for employees and for citizens with ArcGIS Online. So I'll link you in here to our Tableau Public profile. And so these are some of the visualizations we create for citizens. And the way this came about was when I started working at the City of Edmonton, I thought, you know, we have this really great open data portal, and that's great for anyone who knows how to work with data, anyone who's a data geek and wants to go and create applications and create their own visualizations. And it's important that we're open and transparent and have that machine readable information for the people who want to do that. But what about the average citizen who might not know how to take that data and make something meaningful from it? There's lots of data that maybe citizens just haven't had an opportunity to create an app with yet that might be of interest to the general public. And so why don't we start taking some of those things and creating visualizations? And with a tool like Tableau, you can get to something pretty quickly that you can publish for people to get some insight. So I'm kind of glad we went before Darkhorse because we haven't got any really fancy D3 visualizations or anything like that. But our goal with a lot of these is just to take something that's in open data that might not be super accessible the way it is and create something that citizens can review and look at and learn from. And so we have everything from our council meeting calendar, because all of our council meetings are in open data, to what's going on with building permits and development permits in the city. And the one I'm going to show you is a fun one and one of the first ones I created when I started working in data with the city, and it's our pet licenses. And this is always a big hit whenever I demo it, especially to City Hall School. We have kids in grades 1 through 6 who want to know what we're doing with open data. And so did you know you had to license pigeons if you own pigeons in the City of Edmonton? I didn't know that until I created this visualization and I realized there was a third category other than dogs and cats. And so this is just, it's just driven by one data set from our open data portal. And you can browse through and see, how many cats there are in various neighborhoods in the City of Edmonton, how many dogs there are. Maybe I want to know specifically where all the German Shepherds in the city are. And or maybe where all the pigeons in the city are. There are a lot fewer of those. And it's interesting because creating visualizations like this has also helped us clean up our own open data. So when I first created this visualization, and we had our view of all of the pets, there were some bars that had both blue and orange. And I thought, well, that's weird. You can't have a cat that's a border collie. But for some reason, maybe we have in our data set that some are. And it turns out the form that citizens can do online to register pet licenses, they didn't have the correct connection there, so that if you selected cat, it filtered down to only cat breeds, or if you selected dog, it only filtered down to dog breeds. So that was, something we identified and we're able to clean up the data. This is always a fun piece of this viz too, so you can see if you live in a cat or a dog neighborhood. And we just have cats on one axis and dogs on the other, and if there are more dogs than cats licensed in a neighborhood, then we say you live in a dog neighborhood. And you can see it maybe says something about where the dense apartment building, condo building heavy areas are of Edmonton, right? Because you can see that neighborhoods like downtown, Strathcona, Queen Mary Park, Garneau, those are cat neighborhoods. That means more people are licensing their cats or licensing cats than dogs. But overwhelmingly, most of Edmonton appears to be dog neighborhoods. Yeah, part of it is that I think people don't license their cats. we can only tell stories with the data we have. Another visualization, and this is going into the ArcGIS Online tool that I mentioned now. So one thing that we're really excited about is having access to this as a platform at the city. This is pretty new for us. So in the past, we may have created a visualization like this with Tableau, which is a wonderful tool, but it wasn't originally designed for geospatial data. And also things like making Viz mobile friendly are a little more difficult in Tableau. So often there's a lot of work to do to tweak things and create a separate mobile version. And it can be quite time consuming just to go that last 2% to get it looking really good on multiple platforms. The nice thing with ArcGIS Online is it's purpose built for geospatial data. And so much of our open data is geospatial. It allows us to create a useful tool for citizens much more quickly and have it be much more usable. So this was a result of just a couple of days of work of taking a dozen different data sets from our open data portal and saying, hey, summer's coming up. We've got all this information in open data about activities kids could be doing. Let's put it all together on one map. And so you can see here that we've got things like our attractions, our public libraries, our rec facilities. We also recently started keeping track of child-friendly businesses. So there's the ability to, if you're a parent or a caregiver or a kid, to go in and see what's near you, or maybe you're visiting a different part of the city and want to see different activities that you could do. And again, all driven by open data. And throughout the summer, if the data changed in open data, it was updated every 24 hours. So that's a quick taste of some of the visualizations we do for citizens. And I'm going to hand the floor over to George now, who's going to talk about how we take data and tell stories and create dashboards for our employees.
All right. My name is George White. I work at the City of Edmonton Assessment and Taxation. I'll start off with a bit of an apology. Logan was the speaker that was supposed to be here today. He couldn't make it, he got called away for an emergency. So if I sound a little choppy, bear with me. But so Karen had talked about visualization for citizens. What we're going to show here are some examples of some visualizations that we use within our branch for our employees. And what we're looking here is either for like a compelling story for the employees, or drive some sort of insight based on the data. We'll do this with 4 different examples. We're going to start with the category Exploratory Analysis. We talk about our open data, and it's very, very cool. We have our 311 data is up on the open data set. So we took a look at that data. What matters to us is the assessment and taxation data, right? We want to drive changes within our branch. So what you see here is a quick visual of what we did with some of the data. Here's a trend that shows the last 21 days of calls. Light blue is last year, dark blue is current year. It might be hard to see at the back. Right here, we have some kind of aggregations, total number of requests. And then down here, you can see our number one thing that's called in about is the monthly payment program. Over here is a really quick visualization that shows the density of the call by neighborhood. So that's kind of useful information to know if specific neighborhoods have more calls than other neighborhoods. So I'm going to move on to another example of a dashboard that we created. Yeah, this one's performance monitoring, we call it. It came to me as a question originally. The assessors go out into the field, they do inspections on properties. The question was, we believe the assessors have to travel further every year. Can you confirm this or not with analytics? So we could do it on a spreadsheet, but what we chose to do is we did it in Tableau. And I'll show you why it makes a really compelling story here. I'm just gonna flip over. This is going to start in the year 2000. Oh, yeah. Wrong one. I'll go a little quicker. Right. What you see there is that there's a distance in the top left. You can see the density in the red spots. You can see the distance is increasing over time. So a couple things you learn from here when you're looking at this is that we do have inspections in the center of the city, and that's fine. Those are usually like infill type properties. Assessor goes out, inspects there, and then you can see where the growth of the city is, right out here in the outer regions. So it was a neat answer to a question, do the assessors drive further? And we confirmed that, and we also showed kind of where the pockets are. Next category is report development. We have a site called My Property. If anybody here owns a property in the city of Edmonton, you get an assessment notice, taxation notice. There's information on how to get to the My Property site. We're starting a new campaign. You'll see this showing up on Facebook, but it says, no need to hunt and peck for information about your property. Get a bird's eye view today. It is really a fantastic site if you're a property owner in the city of Edmonton. So what did we do with the data that we're getting from this site? Our IT team gave us hooks into our site so we can grab some information from there, where we built out a dashboard to help the people that are developing the property site for the owners. And this is for the people inside our branch that are developing the site for the citizens. Lets them know how many people are registered into the system. And in here, this is kind of a neat, quick view that shows you the activity on the site. You can see there's a huge bump in January and there's a huge bump in May. Again, those correspond to the assessment notices going out and then the tax notices going out. So that tells you that people are coming into the site, they're using the site, they have questions. It's really a self-service thing. And over here, there's also some logging built into the site that tells us where people are spending their time. So for example, you see there's about 14,000 accounts there that have gone into a tab called View Taxes. So that's obviously an area where people are interested in information. So we can use that insight to drive our development of the website to see, is there more that we need to add to that one particular page? The next bucket we call routine analysis. This kind of falls into the everyday work that assessors do. What we have on here is a visualization of land sales in the city of Edmonton. There's 390,000 parcels or properties in the city of Edmonton. This is just a subset of them. What you see over here, they look very cryptic, but what it is a set of very specific filters built for the assessors. So if they have questions on a subset of these parcels here, they change their filters around. It changes their view so they see less parcels. They highlight the parcels if they need to, or they'll sometimes take the entire map, and they can export the information in Tableau, and they still can get the detail that they want, but they also have a visualization of where the properties are. What you will see, though, based on the coloring sometimes, is that they might see an anomaly, right? So if they have interest in seeing a specific account, we have a way to help them there as well. So if I had Tableau here, you would hover, you'd see a tooltip that would have information about the account number, some sales information. And you can click through, and it gives you a picture that looks like this. It doesn't look very good on the screen right here. It's kind of dark, but the city does flybys. We get top of the buildings and the sides of the buildings. So it allows the assessor, if they're unsure about a property, they see an anomaly property, they can click on it and they can see a picture of the property, right? So confirm or deny what they're thinking in their head. So that kind of helps them a lot in terms of driving insight towards properties. That's what I had. I had 4 examples of visualizations to help employees in our branch gather some insight. Thank you. And I think Karen and I are going to do some questions now.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause. So who has questions for our speakers? Go ahead.
I'm just wondering why some of your visuals are set up with a color palette that's colorblind accessible and some of them are not.
So that's, it's funny you should say that. One of the things we're doing is we're going back, we're reviewing some of our dashboards to make sure they're a little bit more consistent in the color palettes. We've, there's some really good resources online for Tableau that show examples of good color palettes. We'll probably revisit some of our visualizations. But if somebody had a problem with a specific dashboard, these dashboards here that we showed are specific to the 180 people in the branch. So they're targeted for somebody. If they had a problem, hopefully they'd come talk to us about it. Does that answer your question? Hey.
Anyone else here? In the back?
So you have Tableau Online, which can be used by the public. Do you have ArcGIS Online, which also can be used freely by the public?
So the question is around whether they have ArcGIS Online that can be used by the public, just so the people online can hear.
So we have visualizations that we've created, and we've only created a few so far, and those can be like consumed by the public. But in terms of actually creating things, I don't believe that ArcGIS Online has a free option. So the nice thing about Tableau is Tableau Public, for those of you who don't know, the software is free. It does a lot of the same things that the paid version Tableau Desktop does, with the catch being is that you can't save it to your hard drive. The only way to save your work is to save it up to the cloud in your profile where anyone can see it. So it's great if you're working with open data and you want to share with the world. Obviously, as city employees, sometimes we're working with private data, so we use Tableau Desktop for that. But if you're interested in trying out Tableau, like I said, download Tableau Public, connect to some of our open data, and you can make some really cool stuff.
Okay, we still have time for a couple questions. In the back over there.
Did you have any governance considerations for your open data portal surrounding who can publish, what they can publish? Is it vetted, or is there any protocol for that?
Yeah, so there's a process that everything goes through. So we have a policy that says data should be open by default. But what happens in practice is that if there's a request for data, or if there's an internal want to release data, then everything goes through, we have a FOIP and legal team that reviews everything before it goes up on open data. We also have a data set request tool on the open data portal, and we have a data set that shows all the data set requests. So we're transparent about what people are asking for, and also about the status that it's at. So whether it's in process, whether the request has been denied, whether the request is still pending. And so if there's data you'd like to see that's not on the portal, definitely feel free to submit a request, and hopefully we can make it happen.
Okay, perfect. One last question here. So the question is around data quality.
Do you want to take this one first, or?
No,
No?
I
Okay.
think you're good. Our dashboards are built for internal purposes, right?
So I would say, one part about making it open is you find people are much more compelled to make sure their data is clean before you release it to the whole wide world. And I think that having an open data portal has been beneficial overall for the City of Edmonton's data quality, because people really think about, oh man, if citizens are going to see this, I better make sure it's in good shape. I actually find that tools like Tableau are also a really great way to get a handle on your data quality. So if you're working with a data set for the first time, or you're trying to figure out if you need to clean up a data set, pull it in, start coloring things, slicing and dicing things and seeing where the problems are, and then you can address them.
Okay, perfect. Let's give Karen and George from the City of Edmonton another round of applause here, guys. Thank you so much. So now we're going to have the speaker from Darkhorse setting up here. I guess I would be kind of remiss if I didn't mention that Darkhorse Analytics is obviously a sponsor of this lunchtime event. They're the founding father, and they do a lot of the hard legwork that goes into organizing these every month. So let's all thank Joey and Craig and Wendy on our way out. I should also mention that this is streamed live. So if you guys, find that you can't make it because you've got meetings that are back to back or something, you can always go to the lunchalytics.com website and then actually tune in to the live stream. And that's another good option. So you can still absorb all of this excellent insights and knowledge while sitting at the comfort of your own desk and eating your lunch. So Joey, are we ready to go?
We'll try.
Okay, with that, I would like you guys to give Joey Cherdarchuk. Did I say that okay, or I butchered it?
Broke it up really well.
From Darkhorse Analytics. Let's give him a round here. Get him started.
How's everybody doing today? Good. All right. So we got a call from well, at that time it was Harvard, Stanford, and Brown economists, and they were looking to visualize some data. And then one of them defected from Stanford back to Harvard, and now it's just Harvard and Brown economists. And so on this particular occasion, we didn't have to worry too much about the analysis. We figured the Harvard and Brown economists had that under control. So we're just concerned about how do we communicate the data that they have. And what was interesting about their data that they put together is instead of looking at just some statistics from census and putting them on the map, they were going to do some research into not what does something look like now, but what does something look like based on where you grew up? Because most interventions don't solve the problem that year. In fact, they're long-term solutions, and they were looking to make change that would last over the long term. So looking at, based on where kids grew up, how did their income change over time? What did that look like? And before this presentation got started, I whipped together my one slide. Let's see if we got it here. So, oh, there it is. All right. Ready? There's my one slide. That is the number of records that we had to visualize. So we had data from 24 different metrics, although when we started out, we didn't know it was that many, times 6 different income levels, times 6 different races, times 3 different gender groupings. And that all comes out to 208,400,000 different things we have to be able to put on the screen. And what's really important about this data is that it's very geographically focused. It's about where you grew up. And so we needed to be able to put that on a map. And so a lot of our dimensions are taken up because the map takes up your position dimension. It has to be geographically sound. So this is the tool we built. Now they're looking to engage a pretty broad audience. They want to be able to, this was going to be released first with an article in the New York Times. So they want to engage the public, get this in the public discussion. But they're also really interested in actually having an impact on policy. So policymakers, people who work in municipal governments, nonprofits, they want them to be able to use this information to help them make decisions. And so we had to answer the question, how do we make 208 million pieces of data accessible to the general public and to policymakers to actually allow them to interact with it and make this data clear. And 208 million is an overwhelming number. So we start with just this 3 easy steps to get you started. And you saw an animation at the beginning, and we show you sort of the 3 key pieces that you need to do in order to use the map. So we're going to start with a place. So I'm going to pick Chicago, for instance. And so we get a quick zoom in to a particular location. Starts off at a lower resolution, and as the internet slowly churns through it, the connection here is a little slower. We get the higher resolution data right down to the tract level. This is what made it so much data, is we had over 70,000 tracts across the US, and we have their actual the actual data at the tract level, except in for some metrics, obviously we don't have enough data to put that together. But for this particular one, we're looking at household income. And so we can look at household income and we can see where the pockets are, where people are doing poorly in terms of growing up in that area. You tend to do poorly with your adulthood income. You can see that in the suburbs and around Chicago, people tend to do much better. But you can compare that with, say, something like rents. So we can flip over and we can look at you can see these are some of the lower rent areas, but there are some areas that don't do as well that are higher rent. Some areas that are high rent in poor neighborhoods. And a lot of what we had to do was performance tuning. How do we make this fast enough so that you can just click on that and we'll update it almost immediately. Another thing we did to sort of make it accessible is we don't show you everything all at once. So we start with sort of 4 metrics that we felt are important. These outcomes are the ones that are based on where you grew up. And then the neighborhood characteristics are census characteristics that are available that are based on the current state of things. And so you push this show more button, and then you can see the full breadth of metrics that they have available to look at for these different areas. Some of these metrics aren't available at the tract level, so they get grayed out. But if we click on college graduation rate, we can still see that at the higher levels, the county levels, that we have this data available for. The other really cool thing about this data is that we can throw up a little distribution of what's on screen. And so we can see this, we actually have in Chicago this bimodal distribution where there's a lot of sort of poorer household income growing up neighborhoods, and then a higher one. But we made this interactive. And so if I'm interested in what is that highest neighborhood, I can click on it and it will highlight it on the map. Unfortunately, it's so tiny, I can't see it immediately. So if I zoom in the map a little bit, my distribution will update, and then I can click again, and we can see right here, we see a neighborhood actually quite close to neighborhoods that don't do well, that's doing well. So that's a neighborhood that we might look at for some inspiration. What is this neighborhood doing, or what facilities exist in this neighborhood that might be contributing to the higher incomes that children who grew up there are having in their later lives. And then you can also dig into it. You can see things by race, and so we can see there's a lot of these areas that there aren't even enough Black individuals living in those areas that we can see it. So you can see some of the racial segregation in the data versus white, and you can see that's actually the opposite in terms of locations. But you can also see where they're doing well versus where they're doing poorly, and we can even break it down to by race and by gender. And we can see interesting stories like Black female or white. Let's go to Black. And I'm going to see based on everyone. Sorry. So this is the distribution relative to everyone. And we can see when we go from Black female income to Black male income, that it shifts to the left. So Black females tend to be doing better than Black males in terms of their household income in this particular neighborhood. We also make this ability to shift the distribution and the color scheme based on the selected group of people that you're looking at, so that you don't always, if you're looking at one particular subgroup, end up with the entire screen being red like you just saw. We can shift it, or we can go to, I just want to compare with what's on screen. And so we get to stretch that scale out, and we can focus in on just a particular neighborhood and what are the disparities between that neighborhood. So you had me as a guide, but the typical user doesn't have somebody who's familiar with how to use the tool, being able to show them and click around on the tool. And so for that, we created these stories. And all of these little storybook icons that we put on the map, one of the first things that you see when you get there, they're sort of other introductions into the data, little tours through the data that don't require someone like me to be up in front presenting and showing things off. So we can look at, for instance, the question of, is upward mobility higher in cities or in rural areas? And for these, all the user has to do is scroll through the tool, and the text gives them a little tour. So here we're looking at, basically we see high levels of upward mobility in the rural areas, and in the urban areas, things seem lower. And so you wonder, well, maybe it's better to grow up in a rural area. But their research found, if we scroll through here, if we go to a different area of the United States, in this case, we're in North Carolina. Just have to wait a second while it downloads. We see the opposite pattern. Here, it is better to have grown up in the urban areas, and we see that the rural areas have poor levels of upward mobility. And so we can take them on a tour of some of the interesting aspects of the data without having them to have to discover this on their own. And they can also get a sense of how to use the tool as they do it. If we go to more stories, we have, say, an introduction. To the tool, where we can highlight specific aspects of the tool. Can map New York, which looks quite impressive at the level of detail. We can zoom into the Bronx. We can filter for them, but also give them a sense of how they can do it themselves. So that scrolling is just a very easy way to tour people through the tool, which sort of gives them a sense of the power that exists in it without having them have to be experts to begin with. So we tried to give them multiple ways to sort of engage with this data, and then interested parties, people who are making policy, they start digging in and asking questions. And one of the great things about the group that we worked with, they put together what is called Opportunity Insights, and it's a whole team of people that works with policy makers and attempts to help them implement policy change in their region. And so even after you've explored the tool, if you have questions and you want to start digging into your own data, you can do that sort of with their help. You can partner with them. And sort of one other thing that they asked us to do was, because these more advanced users have their own data, they want to be able to overlay, say, where are the youth centers in my neighborhood? We've created this little overlay your own data feature for them, and you can simply drag in a shapefile or a list of addresses and locations or lat-long data. Simply drag it into the tool. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare well enough. I don't have a sample I can give you, but I believe this is in the Chicago area, this particular file that we have here. And so if I go back to the Chicago area, it's not in the Chicago area. But much as you see the borders that we see around the city, we can have borders around individual tracts that they might put in there, or for instance, they could put the city's ward boundaries onto the map so that they could get a sense of, a council member could get a sense of what it looks like in their area, or they could, like I mentioned, plot all the youth centers and see, are we placing them in the right places, or are certain of them being more effective than others? And that really allows them to engage with their own, what matters to them, and not just what the tool has available. So that's sort of a high-level overview of what this tool that we created can do. Is there any questions that you guys have? Oh yeah, there's a few hands going up. Start with you.
So in this study, have you made an assumption that the children, where they grow up, they are still living in the same neighborhood when they're adults?
No. So this, when you're looking at this data, it's based on where they grew up. So many of them may have moved to new areas, and so if an area, for instance, was particularly good at helping people out of poverty, it would show up well, but it wouldn't necessarily have a high income because its current income levels may still be low. And so one of the things you can do with the tool, you can actually look at let's go with the poverty rate, for instance, which is the current level, and you can compare that with the income based on where they grew up, or the mobility, economic mobility, and you can see those two things are actually quite different. So this particular area in here has much higher upward mobility. Go ahead.
How do you define growing up in the area? So do you need to spend a certain number of years in the area to be identified as you grew up there?
All right. Well, these are a little bit better questions for the Harvard and Brown economists. But from what I understand, they followed a cohort of individuals from 79 to 84, and another cohort from 85 to 89. And I think they only released the first cohort's data, I believe. So growing up in that area, you had to be in that data set during that time frame, and then they got access through partnerships with the Census Bureau, and they got access to some actual income figures, and were able to link that data together, anonymized, to actually determine that. We had one back there. Yeah. To the tract level, so not to individual households. So they, in their research, had access to linked data to individual households, but that was anonymized, and it had to be released at a certain level of aggregation.
And yet, if you're able to go back and follow someone over time, that sounds like household census update. Would that be fine?
The researchers had access to individual level data, but in terms of what was released, it was released at an aggregated level. So the individual level data is rarely able to be released for public consumption because of privacy concerns. In the back there.
It looks like it's a great app. It's all written in D3. So what percentage on the server versus the client?
So it's not entirely written in D3. We use D3, but in this case, Mapbox is what we were leaning most heavily on. That's a mapping tool, much like Google Maps, that we often use. They've been a fantastic partner in helping us to create this. So we are doing a bunch of stuff on both the client and the server side. We try and download as much data as we can up front so that it has that snappy, speedy look that you can see on the metrics which we've already visited. So we've visited household income. We go to incarceration rate. We haven't visited that yet, so that takes a little bit while for it to go grab it from the server and bring it there. But now we go back to household income, and it's instant. So we're caching a lot of the data that we bring down to make it so that the interactions aren't as laggy as they might be otherwise.
And your, sorry, the story part was an overlay because you could stop at any point and just keep investigating. It wasn't just a.
That's correct. Yes, yes.
Okay, we have time for one more question, so choose wisely here, Joey.
Okay. All right. I think you've had your hand up since the beginning, so I'll
I was wondering about the data source. Was it provided to you by Harvard and Brown already summarized and clean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the wonderful things about visualization is it almost always shows you something that you didn't expect to see. It almost always helps you clean your data. And so, yes, they provided it to us in what they thought was clean, but then there's always something that you're like, oh, that neighborhood does not look right. And it's like, oh, we need to, there's a mistake made there and we need to go dig deeper.
So there was a lot of back and forth trying to figure out exactly what you did from the data?
There was a lot of times where we would re-upload data or new metrics. Eugene, who's not here today, bore the brunt of that. And obviously, 208 million records takes a while to upload to servers and to go through some of the processes that we had to do to make sure it was snappy. So we actually download the data in a couple different ways, whichever way seems faster based on what you're specifically looking at. And so there was definitely a number of times when we wished they would have gotten it right the first time. But being an analytics firm ourselves, we know that almost never happens. So.
Okay, everyone, let's give Joey a big round of applause here. So if you had questions for the speakers and you didn't get a chance to ask them, feel free to stick around. We have the room till, about 1. The next Lunchalytics is on December 19th with the topic to be announced. Aside from that, that wraps it up. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and we hope to see you next month.